Healthcare Breakthrough, a panel discussion on emerging industry trends presented on LinkedIn Live. Each episode examines hot topics driving change from industry thought leaders in medicine. Healthcare Breakthrough, uncovering the next normal. Today's Healthcare Breakthrough focuses on creating a secure and productive work-from-home environment. To shed light on this challenge, we have an esteemed group of experts who will share how to keep employees diligent and extend your organization's security footprint into the home office. Our first panelist is a former Chief Information Security Officer working with a global team of security leaders and Azure security experts on cybersecurity, information compliance, data privacy, and risk management under Microsoft's U.S. Health and Life Sciences Group. Please welcome Chief Security Advisor at Microsoft, Joseph Davis. Our next panelist led ADP's Global Security Awareness and Crisis Communications Group, supporting 55,000 employees in 132 countries with 20 different languages. While with Gartner's Security Awareness Research Team, she authored their Magic Quadrant security protocols. And today, she is an executive at the world's leading security awareness training company. Please welcome Senior Vice President, Strategic Insights and Research at KnowBe4, Joanna Heisman. We are also joined by a security expert with more than 20 years in information technology, including the last 10 in IT customer service leadership, supporting digital transformation. He is a member of a new initiative program at Ivanti called Envision. This helps clients accelerate their digital transformation through a human-centered design approach. Please welcome Principal Sales Engineer and member of Ivanti's Customer Advantage organization from Ivanti, Neil Edridge. And finally, with over 35 years in information technology, including serving as Chief Information Officer and Chief Security Officer for AQuity Solutions, our fourth panelist manages an international IT and security staff of over 300 in 5 countries around the globe. Together, they support over 3,500 healthcare organizations coordinated through 7 global data centers, 15 international service centers, and over 10,000 employees. Please welcome from our show sponsor, Chief Information Officer, Chief Security Officer at AQuity Solutions, today's moderator, Marty Serro.
Panelists, thank you for joining today. Over the last year, due to the pandemic, many companies and employees were faced with working from home for the first time. What advice can you give them on creating a secure and productive work from home environment? Joseph, would you mind giving us your answer first?
Certainly. My advice is usually aimed at employers, namely CISOs. So I'm going to start with the employers. And we encourage them to adopt a modern workplace where you can really securely compute from any location, any device at any time. And that could be achieved by implementing what the industry is now calling a zero trust approach, where you're not as concerned about the type of firewall that the device is behind and the identity is behind, but you're really taking signal out of the risk of the identity and the risk of the device before granting access to either on-premises or cloud resources. For the employee, I would recommend trying to use the corporate issue device that they were given. That corporate issue device is going to be well managed versus maybe their own personal computer, unless, of course, their company policies allow for them to use their own personal computer.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to contribute?
I would. Thank you, Marty. And so the past year, what we found is that the FBI shared that phishing attacks actually doubled from 2019 to 2020. And just based on our customer data at KnowBe4, we found at the beginning of the pandemic back in March of 2020 that phishing attacks increased by 6,000%. And so I would never dismiss the importance of technology and having the right and best technology to help build and reinforce those firewalls. But I think it's also important to look at the human factor, right? And so working from home and certainly being humans and understanding that the pandemic certainly brought what feels like Mardi Gras to these cyber criminals, and an elevated opportunity to cause misfortune, and to provide mischief at daunting levels. What we're finding is that employees that are working from home who are not really aware of all of the potential distractions that working from home can bring really put themselves in a worse position of doing something that would be costly to the business from a breach perspective.
Adding on to what Joseph and Joanna were saying, one of the challenges in working from home is IT loses visibility into their assets. Right, managing assets is a core for any company to protect their security and their data. But one of the biggest challenges IT departments are facing is the unknown. I have this many assets, but I can only see this many assets. And when you have that unknown, you have a security concern. So one of the things that is vital to what some of the products Ivanti has, it's the mature discovery models where you can see the products over the internet and you're able to monitor the software and the hardware health of those devices and what people are doing on them and close some security gaps.
I'm sure that's even more important when you have a global workforce. So it's not only are you using our device, but what's that device doing now? So having that enterprise inventory, I can see how that's really important. As we stated, many employees are working from home for the first time, and this can be a major adjustment, especially when their job requires them to be customer facing or collaborate with other teams. What technologies can employers provide that can help employees be productive in that work from home environment?
One of the things that would decrease the user friction, especially working from home, is to implement modern authentication practices and multi-factor authentication practices that don't get in the way of the user, so that they can still be highly productive without having to continuously enter a username and password. So we're encouraging at Microsoft, we're encouraging many of our customers to go passwordless and really utilize something they are, like biometrics, or something they have, like a FIDO2 device, to authenticate.
I love what you mentioned about passwords and trying to remember them. That's always a challenge. We have biometrics tied to our domain access in our international service centers, and that's great. I mean, it's something that's seamless and it provides the security we need. We all see the news and how cyber attacks are on the increase. The healthcare industry in particular has been hit really hard. What are some of the key safeguards and controls that each employee can do to strengthen their security profile in that work from home environment? Joanna, would you like to start off?
Absolutely. Thank you, Marty. And so I think I'd like to just first set some context here. And we do a lot of review and data analysis based on our customer information. And so when we look at phishing and across our tens of thousands of customers, what we're finding in the healthcare and pharmaceutical space has been actually fairly alarming over the course of the past 2 years. So we look at companies based on their what we call PPP, phish prone percentage, right? And so we look at specific industries and within those industries, organizations, and we can tell our customers what the propensity is of people within their organization to actually click on something that is a phishing attack. And so healthcare in the small, medium, and large businesses in 2020 actually held the top spot in all of those three areas, right? And so when we fast forward into 2021, what we're finding is that although it's gotten a little bit better, organizations that are deemed small, so that is 1 to 249 employees, what we found is that their phish prone propensity is still around 34%. So that is of doing nothing. If they do nothing, then about 34% of their employees could potentially click on something that is malicious. By applying training and education and awareness and elevating their employees' ability to be more instinctive about what they're doing, Over a 90-day period after applying that, it drops to about 17%. And then after a year, it'll go down to about 4%. So that's what we saw in the small and medium sized businesses. When we looked at the large businesses, the fish prone propensity for the large organizations, of which they held that third spot in that category, was about 44%. So it's elevated by 10%, which is significant, saying that almost 50% of your workforce could potentially click on a link. And that's businesses that are 1,000 employees or greater. And so after applying security awareness training for a period of 90 days, that goes down to about 20%. And then from there, it goes down to about 5%.
Those statistics are alarming.
Mhm.
It's great to hear if you have an enterprise security training and education program that can help that
Mhm.
prone percentage, right? That phishing prone percentage. Um, but I guess one of the things that I would like to ask you is when you have that program, how can you avoid that training burnout? I think you hear employees say, well, I just took a training course. Why do I have to take another one?
Mhm.
How do we avoid that?
It's the ability to provide your employees with different kinds of content and different kinds of educational experiences along the way, right? And so, if you keep giving them the same educational experience over and over again, if you use videos, let's say, short micro videos, well, then they're going to get bored with those, right? And so, by working with a company, I can certainly talk firsthand about KnowBe4. We have tens of thousands of pieces of content. And so on any one topic, let's say it's, clean desk policy or insider threat, we could potentially have 5, 10 different ways of getting that content to the employees. So it's a matter of really paying close attention, not just setting it and letting it go, right? But paying attention to the kind and the quality of content and how you're differentiating that content from, every time you want to touch your employees. I think that's one of the critical pieces. I think the other thing is that it's all about frequency too, right? And so it's not about um, end of the year compliance training, which is very, very different than security awareness training that is necessarily on a monthly basis. We're talking about increasing the volume, but decreasing the time that people spend in training. And also leveraging tools like communication and internal social media and lots of different avenues that potentially marketing and PR and corporate communications can add to this to just make it a little bit more exciting and interesting. But for those companies that just set it and let it go, unfortunately, that's where the burnout occurs. And so what I've seen is content really develop and grow and mature, and dare I say, become fun, right? Because in the past, what we found is that content was really, and no offense to anyone, was really authored by security practitioners who really didn't understand that kind of behavioral element to really engaging a human being.
I can add to some of that in my experience of supporting 12,000 people, right? One of the things that we took on as that approach was we explained to the business, the revenue producing people, that this is a partnership. Because if you don't understand the seriousness of this accident and the ramifications of the goodwill of the company, right, could be very unfortunate. So if you take the partnership approach, look, we know it's not ideal training. We know sometimes it's a little boring, but understanding the concept so you think before you click is worth 1,000 kudos to anybody.
It's important that our audience understands how critical this is, but keep it fresh too, right? Keep it interesting. And I guess it's not just the quantity and the timing; it's the quality. So I think if you can make it interesting, it's going to benefit everybody. It only takes one click, right? It only takes opening one attachment. Joseph, how does Microsoft look at that?
Yeah, we do the exact same thing that Joanna was talking about. Most of our compliance training is done like a Netflix series. So it really captures your attention. But that semi frequent short burst of training that's linked to, anti phishing campaigns and so forth, that tends to work best at Microsoft because no one either has the time or the compulsion to sit through a 2 or 3 hour training video, especially when you have to concentrate on it for hours because there's going to be a quiz at the end. And in general, in my career, formerly as a CISO, I've always had success with training users frequently, but in short bursts and short sessions, like nothing more than 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes to avoid that training burnout. The other thing I wanted to add too is that I think in the industry we focus a lot on blaming the victim. Let's be honest here, in that most of the professionals that we support in our organizations are not IT pros, and nor are they social engineering pros. I mean, they're going to trust 99.9% of what comes into their inbox. Now, I understand that technology can't always solve this problem, but as we move to the cloud and its hyperscale and its ability to do an amazing amount of machine learning and context driven decision making, it does a very, very good job of categorizing inbound email as a phishing attack or potentially just junk. And we're relying more and more on that with large amounts of threat signal.
That makes a lot of sense. I know we at AQuity use advanced threat protection, and that's made a big difference for us as well. We talked a little bit about some of the challenges that we all have working from home. The physical environment and the distractions, like me just moving my table around and shaking things, that you can encounter on a daily basis. What are some of your recommendations, both technical and best practices, that can enhance security and productivity? Like in the back of me, you can see a mirror. If you have an employee that's typing in sensitive information, things that you wouldn't typically think about in an office setting, you really need to think about when you're setting up your work from home office, right? So, what is it that you all can suggest that could really help our employees think about that? Be conscious about where you're at, where you're sitting, what makes a good work from home environment, and how do you try to avoid some of those distractions?
The thing that I always go to is who is in your environment, right? And so I think one of the complexities and challenges of working from home for those of us that are parents who have any age children in the house, um, keep them off your devices, keep them away from your stuff. I often find my high school son trying to access my laptop to print something out because I have the best printer, right? And so I think that, if you can minimize other people in your environment using or engaging in your devices, I certainly think that that would be a benefit to both you and your company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anyone else want to add to that?
Sure. One of the mandates that we have at Microsoft is not to have any listening devices in the vicinity where you're doing your work. Your common Echo Dots and your home devices where they're constantly listening to your conversations and potentially, spying on you, if you will, especially if it's a competitor to your organization's, core product. The other thing is, make sure you're retaining a clean desk policy. I know years ago when I worked for a large company called IBM, I think people have heard of it. Clean desk policies were really mandatory, and we'd be audited on them all the time. But once the individuals and the employees go home, there's really no one there to kind of manage that or look after that. So sometimes your shredder can be your best friend, or think before you print, and have something that could be sensitive or confidential just lying around your office at home.
That makes a lot of sense. I know at Acuity we have a very strict clean desk policy, but you don't normally think about that at home. And that's one of the places, like you said, you really need to think about it because You're more relaxed. You don't typically think, oh, I need to secure data because I'm at home, but you really do. Neil, do you have anything to add there?
I would second what Joanna says. Do not let your kids or any family members add or log into your computers and add software that's probably not appropriate. That's a good way to get something on your computer that now you're going to have a problem with from a security standpoint. As far as printing, I do have 2 teenage kids, right? And I said, you send me what you need printed, I will print it out, right? So they're not connecting to the printer. So just little tips and tricks that you just use, your best practice ideas to keep your environment safe, goes a long way. But also I would say, one of the important things for each of us is, as we're working at home and we're not commuting except to the kitchen or the restroom, right? I would say get up and stretch and just take a break, because we tend to just work 8, 9, 10 hours a day and don't really leave the environment. And there's a mental strain. And when there's a mental strain, right, then your guard gets down a little bit, and then you're susceptible to making, a poor judgment.
I know myself working from home, I really need to this is my workspace. And when I'm there, I'm at work. And when I'm out of that space, I'm at home. And I think if you do that, it kind of gets you back into the office environment when I'm in this area, and when I'm not, you can be a little more relaxed, because you're right. You can definitely get into burnout. So I'd like to wrap this up with one final question. Where do you all see cybersecurity going? What could we look forward to?
Going back to what we were talking about earlier about discovery, how important discovery is to understand what you have on your network and what you manage on your network, and the unknown is a scary thing. And they felt that there were some devices that they weren't managing. So leveraging the Ivanti tools and some of our Neurons products, we did some discovery. We found out that there were about new devices on the network that turned out to be Bluetooth toasters. They had these devices that someone purchased, right, that had this heartbeat, and they weren't managed. So technology is really changing, and it's really getting, like Joseph said, about the competitors' listening devices and things like that. And we're going to have to leverage AI to gather discovery, gather information, and help secure and close the security gaps and remediate, because we just can't do it fast enough. The speed of change is amazing right now. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, right? But we have to make sure we have tools to protect ourselves and the organizations.
As we catch up and as we catch on to the newest attack strategies and vulnerability, all of that, the cyber criminals are just that much further ahead of us. And if the past is any indication of the future, I don't see that changing. I would caution us not to forget about that human element, right? Keep focusing on that human being. Keep investing in training and awareness on a continual and consistent and comprehensive basis, because those individuals, are the ones that are making the decisions, about what they engage in and what they don't. And the last, I think, statistics that I saw is that like 91% of the breaches, guys, keep me honest here, 91% of the breaches were as a result of a phishing attack, right? And, especially in a work from home environment, and Marty, you were talking about this before, our environment is dictating to us potentially kind of a lax way in which we look at what we're doing at times, right? Because if we're putting the work hat on in 1 minute and then taking the work hat off in another minute, we're potentially looking at trusted sources where, these emails are coming from. Could be a FedEx delivery notice, could be someone messaging you via LinkedIn, could be a Zoom or a calendar invite. And in that one moment where you're not thinking, or you may be distracted, or you might not have your work hat on, but you're certainly sitting in front of your computer like you shouldn't be when you're not supposed to be working, these humans could make decisions that will significantly impact not only the revenue of the business, but cause potential brand damage that's not possible to overcome in the short term. And so I would say keep the focus on that individual.
Yeah, it is scary, but it's good to know that we've got companies like all of you that are continuing to look at innovative ways, transformative ways to make it safer. Joseph, what does Microsoft have in store for us? What things can you share with us?
Well, I could talk to you a little bit about what we need to contend with, which could either be our undoing or could save us all. And that's, I know that's a bit of a dramatic statement, but think about the effects of quantum computing on common encryption techniques today, right? So we do know that quantum computing poses a threat to how we encrypt data right now, which means that any data that's encrypted as we sit here could potentially be broken by quantum computing within the next weeks, months, years. So we're working on quantum resistant encryption algorithms and techniques. We say resistant because there's nothing going to be quantum proof. The other thing we have to be cognizant of is the implementation of 5G throughout the environment, where that encourages manufacturers and encourages consumers to expect connectivity with absolutely everything they have. When everything becomes part of the internet, part of the Borg, if you will, we have to look at new and innovative ways of protecting those things. Today, as you drive a vehicle, that vehicle is not a vehicle. It's a computer with wheels or a computer with wings. So we have to be very cognizant of the fact that we're now introducing connectivity vulnerabilities into what we used to deem as objects of life safety, the grid, etc. Microsoft is investing a lot in artificial intelligence and machine learning so that decisions can be made much, much faster than a human being can make those decisions about what's malicious, what's dangerous, what's deadly, versus what's not malicious and not deadly. And this is really where we think things are going. So Microsoft continues to try and encourage companies to adopt zero trust, to leverage artificial intelligence when necessary, to really make the best use of cloud technologies, which are more resilient, make better and faster decisions. So it becomes a campaign of influence.
Well, this has been so insightful. I really appreciate your time. Love to have you all back again to continue this discussion. I know it's going to be helpful to those tuning into this installment of Healthcare Breakthrough. So until next time, thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks for having us.
It was a pleasure being part of this panel. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me as part of this panel.
We hope you've enjoyed today's edition of Healthcare Breakthrough on work-from-home cybersecurity measures in healthcare. Our next installment will be on lessons learned from pandemic coding challenges and what follows 2020 hindsight. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these and other healthcare industry topics. Feel free to contact us at info@AQuitySolutions.com. And be sure to follow us on Healthcare Breakthrough's LinkedIn page for more discussions on emerging healthcare trends. AQuity Solutions for Smarter Healthcare.